to episode 479 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' bi-weekly podcast of many topics. I am your host today, Zach Wilkerson, and we are here to talk about a video game that is part of a series that we've barely talked about on Retro Encounter, which is crazy. And we're going to be talking about Fire Emblem, but in this case, the first one that was localized to the West, the Blazing Blade, for the Game Boy Advance back in 2003, I think. And we'll get into more of that. But before we do that, let me go ahead and introduce the panel, starting with you, Lucas.
Hello.
And Audra.
Hiya.
And the biggest Fire Emblem fan I think I might know, which is saying something because I know a few, Ben.
Hello.
Yeah. So I am very excited to be here. I'm very excited to chat through the first sort of, just so you know, listeners, we're going to be talking through sort of the first, 15, 19 chapters of this game. If you've played it before, you know there's a fairly large story moment that changes things, but we're going to kind of focus mostly on the basics of the way the game works. And also Fire Emblem in general, because, again, we've barely talked about it on this show. And that is a crime, which is not Solosi's fault, because most of the games, especially during Solosi's time, were voted on basically by the staff for what's going to come on. In this case, I just decided I want to play some Fire Emblem, so this is why we're playing Fire Emblem. And Ben's enthusiasm is infectious. So speaking of you, Ben, let's go ahead and talk through some of our history with the series. I know your history with the series reasonably well, but some listeners might not. And just kind of get a sense of how you feel about it and which ones you started with, which I think this is the one you started with, and how much you love it. So go ahead, Ben.
Yeah. So this was my first Fire Emblem game. This is honest. It's kind of the game that made me fall in love with RPGs. I played it in like the 4th grade, and it like blew my mind. Before that, I'd only really played like Pokemon, stuff like that. So this was really the first like more mechanically complex game and more story oriented game that I really sunk my teeth into. And it's started a lifelong love of the series for me. There are games in the series that I think are better, but this one just holds a really special place in my heart because of that. And I've played it many times. I played at least once a year, sometimes more than that. So I'd say I probably played it about 30 times or so in my life.
Is officially more than I've ever played a video game by like
That is
2
a
times.
lot.
Yeah, that's amazing. Actually,
Wow.
yeah.
Well,
I'm glad
it's
you're here.
it's very replayable, as most games in the series are. I've played every game in the series multiple times, but every game in the series is very replayable just because of how the mechanics work and how every run ends up being different because your characters end up being different. They level up differently and things like that. And then this game just has so many different like routes and different things that you can do. Your playthroughs can be different, so that's part of why. But also, I just really love it.
But yeah, I actually know a lot less about the history of our other 2 panelists with Fire Emblem. Like I know, Audra, that you've played some Fire Emblem, but I don't know how much. So what is your history with this game, but also with the series in general?
This will actually be my first time playing Fire Emblem. And actually, I've played from the 3DS games Awakening all the way through until Fire Emblem Engage on the Switch. So I like the series and the more, I guess, modern games of the series I'm familiar with. I've gone back recently and I played Sacred Stones, which is the game I think set after this one. If I'm correct in the...
That's correct.
Yep. And so I just wanted kind of the excuse to try to play another Fire Emblem game. Because I do enjoy the series, so...
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you've played all but maybe some of the GameCube ones that have been localized to the West.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've played a lot of Fire Emblem, so it sounds like you like it. Lucas, I don't know if you like it quite that much, but what's your history with the series?
I'm in a similar space there. I played this when it came out on the GBA. This was my first Fire Emblem as well. I was really curious about it after playing Smash Brothers and wanted to introduce to those characters, see what it was about. And I liked like Final Fantasy Tactics and stuff before that, so I tried it out. Absolutely loved it. Played Sacred Stones when it came out. At this I can't remember specifically which ones. I'll say I've played sporadically throughout. Like I played Three Houses. I've played the GameCube ones. I've played a couple of the DS ones. So yeah, no, I've played it on and off over the years. I tend to enjoy it for the most part. I do like tactical games a lot. Fire Emblem, not my favorite series in that category, but it's always fun to come back to.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm the newbie here. Actually, it doesn't sound like it. I absolutely am the newbie here. So, if you are a frequent listener of this podcast, you know that this is my first real foray into Fire Emblem. I played a little bit of Awakening, maybe about half of Awakening, I don't know, about 7-ish years ago, and I thought it was boring and easy. And I traded it in, which I don't ever do, which is crazy, because I'm like, why did I do that? Because that game's worth a lot of money now, first of all, and second of all, like it wasn't that bad. I don't know. I just maybe I was playing too many games, but I didn't love it. And so it wasn't that I didn't want to play other games, but I wanted to play some good ones, and I own Three Houses, but I haven't played it because the hype around that game was just so sort of enormous that I bought it, but I still haven't played it. But and in that game, I'm like, I have to play this game 4 times to get it. Like, and that gets to some of my like, oh my gosh, I don't want to play this game 4 times to get the whole to get the whole picture. But this is my first completed Fire Emblem because, for the record, I have played all the way through this game. I really enjoyed my time with it. I have some maybe beginner newbie criticisms that I am ready for the panel to tell me I'm wrong about. I'm very excited for that, honestly. But I had a good time with it, and this is my first time, and I have got Sacred Stones queued up and ready to go, which tells you that obviously my criticisms are not large enough to hold me back from playing some more.
I would, if I had to guess, and then we'll find out as we go, I'm gonna say a lot of your criticisms will probably be addressed by some of the, like, even as soon as Sacred Stones. They added a lot more quality of life features as it goes on that help with some of that stuff.
Yeah,
possibly too much so on some.
Right. I mean, I think that
Some might say.
I was like, I wonder what Ben thinks about that. Yeah, I think that there's a certain like. Actually, I want to kind of start there. So, and I'll let Ben kind of talk through this. So before we get into like sort of the hardcore nature of this game, and I don't think it's super hardcore, but it has some of that to it for sure. And I think the series itself has some of that. And I think that sometimes the way that the community talks about it might scare some people away. Raising my hand. Like, if permadeath isn't there, then you didn't play a real Fire Emblem game. Get off my game. I'm like, come on, dude. Anyway, so Fire Emblem has an interesting history because, as I think Lucas alluded to, it's been around since the NES. It's been around for a long, long time as a series, but maybe accurately, maybe not. I don't know. Japanese or the I guess probably on the Western side, they decided that maybe the series was in fact too hardcore for us, and so they never localized it until after Smash Brothers and Smash Brothers Melee, which is a game that I am far too familiar with, and it added Roy and Marth. And Marth is a main character from one of the original games, maybe the original, right?
The first one,
Yep.
and the third one as well,
and the third one. And then Roy, who is Fire Emblem 6, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, this game is a prequel to that, to his game. Yeah, and he does appear in this game, but only briefly and not as a playable character.
Yeah, and it's like a little
kid. Yeah,
little kid. He's like 8 or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's a strategy game, and it has a reputation. The series has a reputation for being sort of a hardcore experience where. And a lot of these things are things that I discovered as I was playing, and we'll kind of get into this, where you do have the ability to grind, but in very limited circumstances. if a unit dies, that unit is dead. So it is a strategy RPG for strategy RPG enthusiasts, and I can see why it took a while to come here, but I can also see why, especially in today's day and age, why that sort of thing would be popular.
Yeah, I can give a little background too on the series. So it started in, I believe the first one was either 89 or 90, I think, very late, a pretty late NES game. And then there's a sequel on the NES, and then afterwards they moved to the Super Famicom. And part of the reason too why the games weren't localized prior is also just because of release timing. Like, Genealogy of the Holy War was already a pretty late Super Famicom game in, I believe, 94, and then or 95, and then Thracia 776 was a sequel to that. Didn't come out on the Super Famicom till 2000. So at that point, there was no way Nintendo was going to be releasing Super Nintendo games in the market in the West.
Or putting the
So,
money into translating them at least.
Oh
yes,
yeah.
yes. So that's like a big part of why this series never came over is, one, the localization costs were high, and then two, there just never was a good time because it was kind of stranded on older hardware where it just wasn't commercially viable in the United States or Europe. And then also, so the creator of the series, Shozo Kaga, he actually left Intelligent Systems, who's the developer of the series, after the completion of Thracia 776. And then the game prior to this one, The Binding Blade, was the first Fire Emblem game made without his involvement. So the game prior to this kind of was a new kind of a clean break for the series where they were kind of trying to find its identity without his influence. And they actually kind of simplified a lot of the mechanics, both because it was going to be on the GBA, and then also because, without his influence, some of those more experimental mechanics, they kind of pulled back and gave more of like a pure strategy RPG experience, simpler experience, targeted towards a younger audience. And then that game was, decently successful. And then with the popularity of Marth and Roy and Melee, they decided, oh, well, we could probably bring it, the next one to the West. And so they decided to make a prequel to The Binding Blade, because that would be interesting to people in Japan who had already played the previous game, but then wouldn't preclude people in the West from understanding what's going on, since it takes place before. So you don't have to have any knowledge of the prior game to get into it.
And I think it's like a smart marketing move in so many
Mhm.
ways, because it's funny that it's popular enough for you as like a 9-year old to play it, and it just like sort of hit at like the wrong time for me to even have gotten into it, because when I was in college, I don't know, like I wasn't playing a lot of RPGs because there was too much melee happening in my
Mhm.
life constantly, but um,
Well, and it was on
it's
the Game Boy Advance, and
yeah,
that was really
yeah,
targeted at kids,
which I
right?
didn't even own. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because I was
So,
in college
yeah,
because I'm old.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a fascinating sort of localization story, but I also think it's fascinating that you describe it as a game that is meant to be more accessible. And I'm not saying that I thought the game was like crazy hard or anything, but
Mm.
there are so many elements to it that I can imagine approaching it as like a 9-year old. And I'm actually genuinely curious, Ben, how you could love a game that is so punishing if you make a mistake when you're 9.
W-
It's just really
Well,
interesting to me.
I mean, so the permadeath can be punishing, but in reality, the way that I figured out how to play, and the way that most players, that started with this game, or subsequent games before Awakening, learned to play the game, is that you really just reset the chapter every time a unit dies. So most players are not like actually. It just means that unit death is then a fail state. So in order to not lose a unit, you just reset the chapter and try over. So most people, they're not getting themselves, even though it's possible to get yourself into a situation where you've lost a bunch of units so much so that it makes it difficult to continue. I think most players just won't end up in that situation, because when one of the units they care about dies, they'll just like shut the game off and restart the chapter instead.
Oh,
And
for sure.
yeah, and the structure kind of lends itself to that, because when you reset, like you're always just starting back at the beginning of that chapter. So even though you can lose a lot of progress, you're not really losing like a ton of progress the way you might in like a roguelike, for example, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then it encourages you to like plan your moves a little more carefully and everything. I do have a funny anecdote about this though. When I was a kid, so I was raised by a single mom, and she would take me with her on all her errands. So she would always take me when she went to get her nails done to the nail salon. And one time she took me, and there was another kid in there playing on his Game Boy Advance, and he was playing Sacred Stones. And I was like, "Oh, you're playing Fire Emblem!" Like, this is the first time I'd ever seen somebody in the wild that like wasn't a friend of mine, like playing the game, and I was so excited. And then he's like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "I'm having a lot of trouble though." And he shows me the chapter. He's about halfway through, and he has 3 units or 4 units. Like he has his.
That's
He
true in
only
like the
has
first chapter.
Yes, but he's like halfway through the game, but he only has like Erica, Seth, and like the 2 units that join your army on that chapter. And
Wow.
I'm like,
Oh wow.
buddy, you're gonna have to restart. And the look on his face, he was so crestfallen when I told him he had to start all the way over.
Yeah.
So I
Woof.
guess some kids did end up in that situation, but yeah, I think most people like they lose the unit they care about, and they're like, "Oh no, I'm redoing this whole thing." Like,
Yeah.
I would also say, from the perspective of what makes this game more accessible than some of the other ones, I feel like Lynn's chapter is a
yeah,
lot to do with that, because it
yes,
is such a step-by-step introducing you to the concepts. A
hmm
lot of the other Fire
Yes.
Emblem games, it feels like it just throws you right in at like the point that would be an Elliewood story in this one.
yes, and Lynn's story was developed like they once the game was when they knew during development that it was going to be localized, they actually added Lynn's story in there. So it wasn't immediately or originally going to be part of the game, and it's something they added later when they knew that it was going to come over to the West. And yeah, it functions basically as an extended tutorial, just like you're saying, Lucas. Like each chapter introduces you to the mechanics, but it does it in such a way that like you don't really feel like it's a tutorial. And so that kind of like gets your head around all the different things, and then that way when you go into Elliewood's mode, you're not just like thrown in the deep end. Yeah.
Helps that Lynn is a crit monster. Oh my goodness. Especially if you build her even reasonably correctly, which I know I still didn't, which we'll get into probably in part 2. But yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. So like as a beginner, as a person who has never played these games before, there were a lot of things that I didn't know. Like of course I knew about permadeath, but there are a lot of things that Lynn's story does that I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that's how that worked."
Mhm.
So for example, one of the things that you may not know, listener, if you've never played it before, is that you can only buy gear and items on the maps while you're in the middle of a fight and you're fighting for your life. Which I was like, I had no idea. Unless I'm wrong, someone please correct me if I'm wrong about this, and then I'll feel really stupid. But like, there's always going to be like a spot where you can where you can like sort of go buy. Not always, but oftentimes in a map there will be a spot where you can go and buy armor. And you can't go back and grind, but there might be an arena that for some reason someone in the middle of a fight just decides to go have some random fights in the middle of this battle that's happening for, I don't know, someone's castle or whatever. I thought that the stuff with terrain was really interesting because like in a 2D space it's hard to do, but like if you're standing in the woods and the other person's standing in the grass, you have a better chance of hitting them, which, from like a tactics, as in like a Final Fantasy Tactics trained brain, that made sense, but I had no idea. So yeah, like for me, like there are so many elements of this game that I was like, oh, I didn't know that's how that worked. And like the stuff with the thieves and like opening
Mhm.
doors and treasure chests and there are a lot of really, really particular things about this game. And maybe that's just because I haven't played a lot of strategy RPGs, but I would have been in the deep end. I will admit that I thought it went on maybe a little bit long and I was like, okay, I get it by the end, but um, yeah,
It
there's a lot
does.
going on there.
Yeah, it is. It is. And the good thing is, like, if you play it on hard mode, it just removes all the tutorialization, so you can just do it, go through it without it. Because it kind of makes you do certain turns for a lot of it, where it's like, oh, you have to move this unit here, and then you have to do this thing, And then in hard mode for Lynn's story, you don't have to do any of that. And then you can actually even like, so partway through Lynn's story, like you have to promote Wallace into a general because it's teaching you how promotion works. Well, you don't have to do that in hard mode. You can actually give the Knight's Crest to one of your other units, for example. So
Oh, that would be
that
great.
makes it a
You
little
can
more
save it until you get a higher level
Sane or
character.
Kent
Yes.
would definitely be
Yes.
who I would save it for.
Exactly. So
Oh.
that makes it like worth playing and also easier to go through when after you've already played it one time, because you don't have to sit through all the tutorials, which is nice, and it kind of shows how the game remixes content that it's already shown you, to make it more interesting on like replays and stuff, which is a thing that I think this game does really well.
Having to use that Night Crest was probably the most frustrating thing
Yeah,
as I was playing through it.
yeah, because
And,
Wallace is
and
not
that's
very
saying
good,
something
but-
because I had my game crash at one point and had to replay like half of the tutorial.
Oh no.
Aw.
Yeah. But yeah, it does a very good job of like teaching you the unique like Fire Emblem mechanics. And really, Zach, like you're saying, oh well, maybe it's just because I haven't played a lot of tactics games, but that's not true. I mean, Fire Emblem is very unique in its mechanics, compared to a lot of other strategy RPGs. So there's a lot of things that Fire Emblem does that other games just simply don't do, or do them in a very different way. So I think that was also helpful to have that kind of Lynn's story tutorial, to because even if you played Tactics Ogre, Final Fantasy Tactics before this, a lot of the mechanics that are in Fire Emblem are just very different. So you wouldn't necessarily intuitively know how things work just based on that prior experience.
Yeah, and I'm curious because Audra and Lucas both, like, as people who have played through it before, I know we haven't really described Lynn's story, but just listeners, if you don't remember, Lynn is a member of a tribe called the Sacian. I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
The Sacaeans, yeah,
Sacaean. Okay.
and
Um,
yeah, they're like that's one of the countries in the continent of Allied. Yeah.
okay. So she's Sacaean, and you just sort of discover very early on, after like her family was killed by bandits, and it's sort of like this nomadic tribe. And she's like the granddaughter of some marquis that her mom got cast out, or maybe she left of her own volition.
Mhm.
And she's basically being tasked by these two knights of Kalen to come back and meet her grandfather, and also maybe stop her uncle from, or her granduncle. Is that right?
I think
Yeah,
it's her
great uncle.
granduncle.
Yeah, granduncle, from killing her grandfather. And that's sort of pretty much the beginning and end of the story there. I mean, I think there's some interesting things with the way that people talk about the Sacaeans,
Mhm.
in terms of like sort of
Yes.
racism and xenophobia and things like that. So I think that part is pretty cool, and I think that kind of like that thread is one that sort of in many ways runs through the rest of the game,
Mhm.
and I think it's one of the most thematically interesting threads in the game.
Mhm.
That was one of the things I had noted, was like that was one of the only like really meaningful, it was one of the only things I found interesting as far as the story beats went in that, because it's a very straightforward narrative. Like the villain is the mustache twirlingest villain
Yes.
you could have.
I
He's
believe he
literally
actually does twirl his
monologuing.
mustache. Yeah.
Yeah. He literally monologues about how he's poisoning the king
Yeah.
in front of people.
Yeah. Yeah, and the game, so this is it's a good example of like how this game fits in with the previous game. So this game is really focused on doing a lot of world building for Elib, the world that it takes place in, and kind of fleshing out some of the concepts introduced in the Binding Blade. And that's a good example, like the kind of prejudice that the Sacaeans face, from especially in Lycian society. So her grandfather is the Marquis of one of the territories in Lycia. Lycia is a country that's made up of a bunch of different territories, each ruled by a different noble house, and they make up together the Lycian League. But of course, because there's all these different states within one kind of conglomerate state, they're always kind of fighting each other or having disagreements, and there's all these wars of succession. This is a common thread that happens in this game and then in the prior game as well. And so the Sacaeans are more kind of influenced by Native American culture, and then a little bit of like East Asian Japanese culture as well. And so they are treated, you know, poor. Like, in basically the Lycians are pretty racist against the Sacaeans. They view them as like savages or whatever, kind of like how the European colonists viewed the Native Americans, for example. And even though the game doesn't do a whole lot with that, it does kind of add a unique flavor to the world and to some of the characters. Like, in addition to Lynn, you also meet Wrath in Lynn's
Oh,
story, and
yes.
he is dealing with a similar thing where he is not trusted or not treated in accordance with his character or abilities because he's Sacaean. And so that's kind of a thread that kind of carries through and into the rest of the game, and also with the previous game. So that's also a major plot point in the Binding Blade as well.
Yeah, I thought, like, again, as you guys have all said, I think that the story is silly, but I do at least like that they have some meat to it. But I actually, before we get into sort of some of the more nitty gritties of some of the mechanics, I am curious, like for you, Audra and Lucas, did you in any way find Lynn's chapters frustrating? Like, oh, like, why do I have to do this? Because even I was like, okay, I understand how to move a unit. You know what I mean? So like, I was like, all right, I get it, but I still rather them go a little too far because I am not usually a tutorialization fan, but oh my goodness, like I don't even want to know what would happen to me if I didn't have these.
I thought it was a very clever way to do a tutorial mode. I kind of found it funny that they have the tactician character, and it's almost like they're Dora the Explorer
Yes.
in it, where it's
It's a
like
great
she's
metaphor.
like turning around, like Lynn's turning around to the screen and going like, "What do you think we should do?"
It's like, I think you should make the decisions. You seem more qualified than I do.
Yeah.
Is what I was thinking.
I
But other than that, I thought it was very clever way to explain the mechanics and stuff, even if I did not want to use the Night Crest.
I didn't mind it explaining things. I didn't like that it forced you to do specific turns, and like there were a couple spots where you have to move to a specific square, and it's like
Mhm.
if you end up like pushing one off to the side, it like cancels it and says, no, you have to move over here, and then
Yeah.
like pulls it back. Again, I had to do this whole section twice because my game crashed, and that was the second time through. I accidentally pushed the wrong button so many times because I was just trying to rush through it, and not being able to just play through was definitely a little frustrating.
Yeah, Audra, it's interesting you bring up the tactician like actually being a character, so you having like a player avatar in the game, because this is actually the first Fire Emblem game to have a player avatar in the entire series, and this is something that they would carry over, and now is a big feature of the series. So in Awakening, of course, you have Robin, as they're collected,
Hmm.
colloquially known, but is a player avatar character, and then Byleth, of course, and Three Houses, and Fates
And
also has,
Corin and Fates, yeah.
yes, yes. So a character that you kind of customize and input your own, you can kind of project, the player can project themselves onto. So this is the first time that they ever did something like that in the series. And, of course, the character's not playable in this iteration, but then in later iterations would become an actual playable character. And a lot of people are very mixed on that, especially longtime series fans, of having the like player insert character. I think it works for this game, but I'm not a huge fan of it once the characters actually become playable characters.
I,
But
I mean,
yeah.
I thought it was strange because like I forgot that I was supposed to be a character most of the time. You know what I mean? Like it was like, like they would be talking and they'd be like, "Oh, and Mark, I think, because I didn't change the name. I think
Oh,
Mark
that's
was
the
the
default.
default
Yeah.
name." They're like, "Hey, Mark, what do you think?" I'm like, "Who's Mark?" Like, "Oh yeah, oh yeah." I guess I should have named it like Zach, so I remembered that they were talking to me or something. I don't know. But it felt like a weird shoehorned in thing. But it's also interesting because then like the idea of then sort of creating avatars then leads to some of the mechanics, we'll say, in like something like Awakening, where you
Mhm.
have a lot of choice, right, in terms
Mhm.
of how you build your army because of pairing characters off. I think it's a little weird and distasteful, but whatever. Um, so it's sort of interesting that you see that genesis here. I had no idea that was true.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
always
an
found it
interest.
interesting if you name them after yourself, then it sounds like it's the game's immersion breaking to ask
A
you the
little bit.
question.
Yeah, and they will like their portraits will turn and they'll like look at you directly
Hmm.
when they talk to the tactician character. So I mean I thought it was cool when I was a kid, you know, for obvious reasons. Like, oh my god, they're talking to me. They're my friends, you know. Now I don't really care too much about it. And like you guys were saying, there aren't that many moments where they actually do refer to the tactician. It's very rare. That, you know, it doesn't really get in the way, but it's also kind of like feels almost like a vestigial thing too. Like, well, then why
Mhm.
is it there if it's not that important? But it did have a big impact on me as a kid. And they do change the dialogue depending on what story you're playing. So if you're playing Hector's route, then Hector will address you and say different things compared to Ellie would,
Hmm.
which is kind
That's
of a
good
nice
because
touch.
Hector's
Yeah.
way cooler than Ellie Wood. So
Yes.
it's a low bar, I guess. But
Is this when we take a moment to just say Eliwood is possibly the most boring Fire Emblem
yeah.
lord
Oh my
that has
goodness.
ever been
Well,
created?
you say that, Lucas, but the Binding Blades Roy is so much more boring than even Eliwood, let me tell you.
Fair
So
enough.
Eliwood is actually has a lot more characterization than the main characters in a lot of previous Fire Emblem games would have. But the problem is he's in a game with a lot more interesting characters surrounding
Right.
him. So yeah, but yes, he is kind of a uh, goody two shoes, I guess, right? Like you're almost like stereotypical shonen protagonist type character, I
Oh,
think.
for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Not
I had
that
to
Fire
keep
Emblem
trying to
ever has any character archetypes.
Oh,
I kept trying to refer
we.
to him as Adel sometimes because he has the red
Yeah,
hair.
I could see
Oh,
Oh
that.
yeah,
at all?
yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if they took some inspiration from Falcom for both Roy and Eliwood. Yeah.
I mean, I think that Falcom is, in terms of like the type of stories they're telling here, kind of writ large
Yeah.
on Fire
Yeah.
Emblem.
There's some similarities. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I actually think that like we could, I guess we can talk a little bit about the storytelling because like another thing that I didn't really know was that like the story is sort of told in like these and I think that like the art itself is actually like I imagine especially on the GBA at the time very cool and
Mm-hmm.
very beautiful. I like the sprite work a lot. I think it looks great. Even like blown up on my like 65-inch TV, I was like this still looks really good,
Mm-hmm.
which is impressive. But it's sort of like almost like VN style in
Yep.
terms of the character models and them talking to each other. You don't have maybe the choice you would have in a VN, but the choice comes in how you get destroyed in battle, at least for me. But I thought it was again that was something that I didn't know, but I thought it was really cool. I really liked the way the story was told. I think that it didn't usually overstay its welcome. I mean, maybe in like chapters
Mhm.
like 25 through 30, when I'm like, okay, you think this story is much more serious than it really is, but in the early going, it felt like the rhythms of the storytelling and the way that like even the story was told during battles sometimes I thought was really cool.
Mhm.
And the way that mechanics could work sometimes. Like I think about that ship battle, which I'll get more into when we talk more about the mechanics, but like it still felt like that was part of the storytelling. And the characters are really good too. I just wish so much of the characterization wasn't tied behind those support conversations, which are so difficult to access.
Mhm. Yeah, and another interesting way that they do integrate storytelling with the battles is that a lot of characters will actually have like boss conversations, and so this is like a common thing in Fire Emblem is that if you have a character that has some kind of connection to a boss character and you have them engage in battle with them, then they will exchange lines of dialogue before fighting. And there's actually a lot of characters who have even some that you might not think of that have interesting dialogue scenes that you can only see by having them go into battle with one of the boss characters. And sometimes it's characters you would never actually want to fight the boss, so you'd only be doing it to like see the scene. And sometimes there's a lot of inherent risk to that too. But yeah, it's a cool way they kind of integrate those two things.
Which it feels like to me a lot of that stuff I really wish they had just done it in a more straightforward way in most of the time, and I realize that that's looking kind of back on this with a modern lens to some extent of they buried a lot of really cool stuff in this. I mean, I still found it really cool when I was younger, but I also missed a lot of stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a major flaw of the game, especially the support conversations. I would say something like 50% of the writing in the game is in the support conversations. And so you're missing, like, if without seeing them, and I think most players won't see more than like 5 to 10% of them in a normal playthrough.
Yeah.
You're missing like half of the writing in the game, which is like
Yeah.
most of the characterization and a lot of the backstory for characters and their motivations is contained in those, and that is a shame. And I guess I can explain a little bit how that works. So if you have units next to each other in battle, or within a few tiles of each other in battle, then they will. And this is a hidden stat. Basically, they will gain like relationship with one another, and then once that hits a certain level, when you put them together on the battlefield, you can spend a turn to have them support with one another. There will be a unique support conversation between the two of them, and then that forms a support, which then has mechanical bonuses to the units when they are together based on their affinity, and then the affinity of the unit that they're supporting with.
I just want to point out how how difficult it is to. You're explaining it extremely well, but I'm like, that was like 7 steps.
I know. It
Yeah.
is very complicated. And you have to sacrifice a turn too. So this is in the middle of battle,
Oh,
and you only
yes.
yes, so that you have to be like, "Oh, I'm not gonna go attack something. I'm gonna have them talk to each other." And then instead of like using the unit like I would normally. So you are sacrificing a lot to do it. And then the mechanical benefits of supports are not equivalent. So certain affinities are better than others. And so sometimes like a support may be interesting for narrative reasons, but is not very useful in combat or vice versa. And there's no way for you to know that until you actually just do it in an experiment. And then you also have no idea. You can't look at a unit's like parameters in the menu and see how close they are to getting a support with anybody. So you're really like flying blind. And that's kind of what makes it difficult to see them all. You pretty much have to, if you want to see them, look them up outside of the game. Um, and that's a big flaw and something that later games would address. But yeah.
The only reason that I saw a lot of the supports the first time I played through the game was um, specifically the healer or the one of the healer characters had supports with like half a dozen people because they are a character that always is like hiding behind the same like tanky characters and healing them repeatedly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, I guess
Is that Sarah or
Sarah and
Sarah?
Hector are just gonna
Yeah.
Sarah and Hector are just gonna get along because he's tanking, she's healing. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's even some characters that like you don't get until very late in the game, and they have full support relationships with multiple different characters. And so you have like 1 or 2 chapters that you could actually feasibly build those supports, which is
So
just like who's ever going to
I'm
do
guessing
that?
a character whose name starts with a J has a support like sequence with someone who starts with an N.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
crazy.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
and even getting the 2 of them, which I somehow did magically,
Mhm.
that's a part 2 conversation, is hard enough. But then a full that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a character you get, Zach, that's at the very like the second to last chapter, and he has full support conversations with like 5 different characters, and they are very interesting. Some of the most interesting supports in the game, and you only have 2 chapters with which to build them, and that's crazy.
And those aren't
But
exactly easy chapters either.
no,
At least they
no.
weren't for me, that's for sure. I was like, "Oh, you gave me like 17 mini bosses on a single map." But again, I'm getting ahead of myself here.
So yeah, it's a big flaw with the support system. But you know, I mean, that's how all the previous games were designed, and then even up until basically Path of Radiance is the first game to really change how that functions. I think it's just kind of a holdover from the Super Famicom titles. and they just didn't really come up with a better way of making that available to the player. And it's kind of a shame, but the support conversations are really cool. So it does flesh out a lot of the characters very nicely.
I think that I could be more forgiving of that if it wasn't also that like there are all these other like hidden objectives sort of hidden
Hmm.
throughout all these maps, right? Like so I guess from like a broader perspective, we have in this game you have 30 chapters ish. I mean, you have like some guidance chapters, which are basically like introducing characters. You might have like a side quest chapter. So I'm not sure how many chapters are really possible in this game. I'm guessing Ben knows the answer to that question.
Yeah.
What is it, like 39?
I think that technically on Hector's mode, there are a total of 40 some odd
Okay.
chapters that are possible, but some of them have very difficult requirements. So, most people are probably not going to see all of them, but
Well, I
uh,
saw almost none of them on Elliowood's route. So,
well, and some of them
and
are exclusive to Hector's
yeah,
too. Yeah.
yeah, fair enough. But yeah, I mean, like you have these very specific requirements. So, for example, there is, I think that is the desert in this section.
No.
No.
Dang it. I'm just going to use the example anyway, just because we're talking about mechanics. So there is a later chapter where you have to recruit a character, and then after you recruit that character, you have to do 700. You have to gain 700 experience, which doesn't sound as difficult as it actually is. Because unless you do some crazy finagling with like literally rescuing someone, there is this mage character who's off in the middle of the stage, who is completely overpowered at that point in the game and ends up being one of the best units in the game in general, and is just like wiping the floor with every other unit around you. And so, unless you knew specifically to get in your Pegasus Knight, fly over there, pick that dude up, take him away, like you're never going to access that. Like I even like, because the reason that I was even aware of it is because there's also like 17 things hidden on that map, and like I got to the point where I was like, I feel like I'm not getting enough side chapters, so I need to check for this stuff. And so that is fun, I guess, if you know what you're doing, but I thought it was a little too obtuse
I
in,
will.
in general. Not even just that, but just like
Yeah.
the I think there's one that you have to. Ben told us about that, where it's like you have to get some character to level 9 at the end of Lynn's chapters or something,
Yeah, you
and
have
then
to
you
get.
don't get the guidance chapter until chapter 29. I mean, I don't remember.
Yeah, it's so you have to get Nils to level 7, which is something you can only do by like waiting out turns, more turns than you would need in Lynn's story. And then you have to defeat. You have to. There's a previous guidance chapter that you actually have to defeat this really difficult unit. And so if you do both of those things, then you get an additional guidance chapter. That's chapter 19XX. So yes, very difficult to do, but no one would do it just under normal circumstances. It's something you really have to like look up to figure out as a thing. And there's a very interesting like story detail that's hidden in that chapter as a reward, that we'll talk about next time. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that, just like secrets and things like that in
I
the
feel
game.
like a much simpler example is like even the merchant
Yes.
guidance chapter,
Yes.
which all you have to do, from what I could tell, all you have to do is go into a couple of the houses in the
Mhm.
and talk to the villagers, which is a fairly straightforward thing as far as unlocking it goes. But if you don't do that, you lose the merchant mechanic for the entire rest of the game, where you can actually have a
No,
storage,
Well,
from my
no,
understanding.
he will still no,
it
he
was
still
like
joins.
3
He just
chapters later.
yeah,
Yeah,
he
it
just
Oh,
wasn't
joins
too
a few
okay.
bad.
chapters later.
Because
Yeah.
I actually
Okay,
missed
that's
him
slightly
because
better.
I don't
Yeah.
know how. I feel like I was going into everybody's house. I was like,
Oh,
"Hey, I know
jeez.
we're in the middle of a fight, but
Okay.
let's go, let's visit. Hey, how's it going? Oh,
I,
you want to
I
give me a
take back
hero
what I
crest?
said
Cool,
about it
thanks,
being too
buddy."
simple.
I mean, you're not wrong. I just missed it. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, so that's on chapter 13. There's a village up towards the north, and the only way you can access it is either with the Pegasus Knight, or you have to hit a snag to make a bridge across the river, and then you can bring a unit to go to that village. If you go there, then you you meet Merlinus first, earlier than you would normally, and then he gives you a torch, and then you get the Gaiden chapter, which is a Fog of War chapter, so you can use the torch to get rid of the Fog of War, and then you rescue him from some bandits, and so he joins your army earlier. And it's really just a way for you to get access to him quicker, and then for him to get levels quicker, so he promotes quicker. But yeah, like that one. I mean, it is just as simple as visiting a village, but like it's very easy to pass on that village because it's up in the north, and you're like, who cares? And then the reward you get for it is like not very good. So you're like, oh, why did I even bother doing that? And you don't really know that if you were to do it and then you got the Gaiden chapter, you wouldn't even really know that that's the reason you got the Gaiden chapter in the first
Oh.
place. So yeah.
Yeah, because I did unlock that chapter, and I did not know that I could have missed it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and it is one that Gaiden chapter is one of the more difficult early chapters as well because it's Fog of War and it's a defense chapter. So that's something unique to this game, or unique about this game too, is that most of the previous Fire Emblem games didn't have the win condition was always seize the gate or seize the throne. But this game introduces additional win conditions to certain maps. So some are defense, some are like surviving a certain number of turns, some are like killing all the enemies, things like that, protecting a certain NPC. Most of them are still seize the throne or kill all the enemies, but occasionally there's like some unique win conditions that kind of shake things up a little bit, and that's one of
One of the things that I liked was like those defense ones I thought were particularly interesting
them.
because after you get Merlinus, you then have like this tent or whatever, like sort of sitting somewhere on your map, but it's like usually at the starting point, and like I'm usually not going to have units anywhere near that starting point by the end, right? So, like, I feel like one of the general, maybe kind of weaknesses of this game is that most of the maps I feel like are kind of samey. A lot of them, there were maybe like five that I thought were kind of interesting strategically, and most of them, I'll talk about one of them in a little bit here. But one of the things that I thought was cool though was that like when you're especially on defense ones, they would add in new units. They would just come in at different like sort of spots that you might not be expecting, and so you're like, oh, I left that area completely defenseless. Um, and so I thought that was it was interesting because it made me think about it, right? Because I know we haven't talked about like the weapon triangle at all, but I'm sure if you're listening to this, you know what that is. Where basically the axes are strong against
Lances.
lances, right?
Hmm.
Lances are strong against swords, and then swords against axes.
Hmm.
But I sort of learned that it didn't really matter as that much the weapon triangle in this game, at least from my experience, because Hector exists. um,
It matters a lot more in hard mode,
yeah,
but in normal mode it doesn't matter that much, especially in this game because, well, they've made some changes on the back end to like hit rates and things like that compared to the
okay,
previous game to kind of normalize them across weapons. So in Binding Blade, axes were like extremely inaccurate and but also like extremely powerful. So you'd had a lot of cases where like axe units had a really hard time hitting, but if you got hit by even one enemy axe unit, it would like like take half your health or more for most of your units. So they kind of changed that up a little bit. So that makes the weapon triangle a little less impactful than it has been in some other
yeah.
games. Yeah.
Well, I actually thought that it was frustrating. I actually thought it was kind of frustrating that it didn't matter as much because I felt like I would be like going into a fight with an enemy where I'm like, I won the weapon triangle here. Like I made the right choice and it didn't really matter. Because the percentage hit for them was still way higher than mine. But I guess my general point with that was like, because of that, like Hector is so powerful that I could just set him next to the tent
Mhm.
and just not have him move. Then as the new units came in, they would all try to hit Hector. And even if they did, it would be like, no damage, no damage, no
Mhm.
damage. I was like, I love my boy Hector. Also a great character. He's way more fun than Ellie Wood.
Yes. Yeah, he's great. He's great. He's one of my favorite characters in all of Fire Emblem. Yeah. Um, but yeah, the reinforcements too is an interesting way they kind of shake things up, and adding Merlinus as like a stationary unit is a way they make them a little more impactful. So actually, some games in the series have reinforcements that show up and move on the same turn.
This one
Which
does.
are there same turn
Yep.
reinforcements in this one?
Uh,
Uh,
I I at least ran into it in I specifically ran into that in the port mission, the one right before the ship.
Oh, that is true.
The Gaiden one.
The Gaiden chapter, yes, there are same turn reinforcements in that chapter, but most chapters don't have them in this game.
I didn't realize it was unique to that. But that guy showed up out of nowhere. This is like, if you did not get that Gaiden chapter, it's a level 5 paladin that shows up on the map, rides halfway across the map if you're in range, and one-shots pretty much anyone but your strongest characters. So
yeah,
I got to start that one over.
I forgot that he does show up as same turn reinforcements. For the most part, though, there aren't same turn reinforcements in this game, but that is a big thing. So like some games have them, and people, Fire Emblem fans like debate whether that's good or not. A lot of people find them very frustrating. But it is a way, having Merlinus be stationary for most of the game was a way to like make the reinforcements more impactful, because you do have something that's like vulnerable, that you have to defend, and makes you like consider that a little more. Because then if he dies on a chapter, he doesn't die permanently, unlike most characters, but he will leave for the remainder of that chapter. Meaning, if anybody's inventory is full and you like loot an item or get an item from an enemy, then you might have to discard something, and it won't just get automatically sent to your convoy.
Painful.
Yes.
Ugh.
Yes.
Yeah.
I let go of some healing items. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to die because of this, and I was almost always correct when that happened.
Yeah, and I guess we should talk about too, like, since we're talking about like inventory management, like that is a big thing in this game. Everybody has like a limited inventory, each character, and then weapons also have durability. So you're constantly needing to replenish your supply of weapons, and then units can only carry so many weapons into battle. And so that's a thing that you're constantly having to manage is, do my characters have enough weapon uses to get through this battle? And have I hit enough shops up to replenish their supply that I can make it through the next chapters? And managing your gold versus how many items you have, that's always a big consideration as well, as you progress through the game.
I almost ran out of axes on the Dread Isle just because there's a stretch there, and I should have bought a few more, and I didn't, and I regretted it.
Yeah, and they do try to warn you, like, when you're about to hit a stretch where there's not going to be a shop, they'll like tell you, hey, like you should buy stuff now, but that doesn't mean that you actually know.
Doesn't mean I have the cash to do it either.
Yeah, money can be very tight at certain points in this game. And then there is a grading system. So the game actually does grade you on a few set parameters. And one of those parameters is funds, which is related to how much money you have on hand and how much you're spending. So trying to get a good funds rank, people care a lot about that, for the overall.
Just painful.
Yeah.
Sometimes I was looking at those rankings and they were just like progressively getting worse as I was getting better at the game. But I'm like, you force me to do crazy stuff in this game sometimes, like waiting things out or like running across the map or like, I don't know, literally taking my character and running them in a circle because I'm trying to find an item or something. And so I'm like, how dare you give me rank downs for that? But it's again, another like sort of thing that's in the system that sort of allows for mastery, right? But yeah, like I did not like the weapon durability stuff at all. I especially found it frustrating with like a good weapon, like I don't know what was like the manicotti.
Like the proof. Those are called like proof weapons, where they're only for one character, and those weapons are usually particularly strong. It's a way to make certain characters that are stronger than they would be otherwise.
And Lynn was strong enough without it, and so I was able to kind of give her like some other sword and she was fine, but I didn't really realize early on. So I'm like, oh, what, like I only have 5 uses left of the manicotti, and how am I going to do damage to this boss? And it was a lot of menu management. And I'm okay with some tinkering, and I really enjoyed the tinkering and like figuring out my units and how I was going to lay them out, and like, but at a certain point I was like, okay, I have 20, I have like 5 silver sword uses. I'm going to switch that out for 20 now. And then like I had like 16 in my inventory that were like 4 uses. I'm like, okay, it's just like, it was a little exhausting at a certain point, at least for me personally.
The UI for that is not great.
Yeah.
Yeah, the inventory management can be very clunky, for sure, and that's something that later games would address. But the systems in the Game Boy Advance games are very simple, and this is one of those areas in which that can be kind of a problem for sure. And then even trading items between characters like that can use up your turn or using an item, so you really have to consider whether it's worth it to trade or use an item or equip something different. Yeah.
For the record, I thought it was really cool though that you could only buy gear on the maps. Like because it turns the maps into, and I include the arenas with this as well. Like it
Hmm.
turns it into like more than a, you know, pack all your characters together and then rush them this way and then rush them that
Hmm.
way and then rush them the other way, which is typically what most tactics RPGs or tactics games turn into, at least from my experience. Um, and so I really liked that it gave me like additional. I know that they're like secret objectives, but in this case, there were other things where I was like, oh, I know I need more axes, and like, oh, who am I going to send that way? Like every map, even the easy ones, was like an exercise in having to use my absolute focus. And that's actually one of the most interesting things about this game to me, is that like because you have so many units, like at a certain point, like I was like fielding like 15 units. And like there were times when I would forget that like one of my units had low HP because I just forgot. But like it's an exercise in making me pay attention all the time. And
Hmm.
I know that that's maybe not everybody's favorite thing, especially in 2026. But for me, I thought it was thrilling. Every time someone died, I was like, oh, I just need to pay more attention next time. And
Hmm.
I feel like I'm leveling a lot of like nitpicks here, but like for the record, I really enjoyed this game. And I think for me, that was the number one thing that I just loved about this game.
Yeah, and it's you're right. There's like they do a really good job of diversifying the maps with not just the main objective, but these additional side objectives that prevent the kind of strategies that you're talking about, Zach, like turtling or keeping your units bunched up. So like the villages is like one of the main ways they do this, where there'll be these villages on the map, and if you send a character to go visit them, usually you're rewarded with some kind of item. In a lot of cases, those items are really powerful, either really strong weapons or promotional items that are very valuable, and things you don't want to miss. And then the other thing they do is there are particular types of enemy units that can destroy villages. So they will often spawn nearby to villages enemy units that will go and destroy them, to encourage you to like split your army up so that you can hit different objectives on the map. And that really kind of is a very intuitive way of getting you out of some of those kind of fallback strategies like turtling or bunching everybody up together. Um, but you can ignore those additional objectives if you just want to get through the game, but there are consequences to doing that. And I like that kind of
That would
design
be
that
a
the
huge
games have.
error.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
I
would. It
struggled
would.
enough even trying to do those things.
I
Yeah.
feel like yeah, the treasure chests and the enemy thieves
Hmm.
do the same thing, where
Yes.
you'll see the thief characters from the
Oh,
enemy side.
enraging.
Yeah,
Enraging.
that was, I ended up replaying the Dragon's Gate chapter like 3 times, just trying to make sure I got the recruitable character and the treasure chests. And then I still realized after the fact that I missed some secret stuff that was a lot more hidden, which is probably for the best, for the sake of me enjoying the rest of the game and not just coasting through it. But
Are you talking about
that's okay.
the member card in the secret
Yeah,
shop, Lucas?
there's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's apparently a member card that you can steal from an enemy thief that spawns 6 turns into the battle.
Hmm.
You have to steal it with your thief before he gets to the treasures and before you kill him. And then there's what is it, 2 different points on that same map
Hmm.
that are not marked in any way that have shops in them.
Yes. That sell items that you can't buy otherwise. Yeah. And there's a
Yeah.
bunch of other secret shops on other maps that you have to access using the member card. And then there's also later, there's a silver card as well that you can get that will have the cost of all items in shops if you have it in your inventory. So that's a good way to buy things like promotional items get sold in the secret shops, or really hard to obtain weapons, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing too about thieves is they can also, so you can use your thief if their speed is higher than an enemy's speed to steal items from enemies, and sometimes that's required for certain promotional items and things like that. But the flip side of that is that enemy thieves, if their speed is higher than your unit, they can steal items from you. So there are, and in most thieves, their AI is such that they will try to steal if they have the opportunity. So you can have a unit put up, in a spot where a thief can get to, and you'd be worried because thieves are pretty weak that they'll be, in any danger. But then that thief can run up to you and like steal like a valuable item from your inventory, and unless you can steal it back, then it might be gone. So it's kind of an interesting way that the game will like allows the enemies to also take advantage of the same mechanics that the player can and turn the tables on you. So you always have to be like considering where you're moving things and who's in line of sight of different enemy types and things like that. Yeah.
Keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, and it was very rare because I will admit that I just out of curiosity for how it would go, I let one of my characters die, and it was like some axe user, Bartra, I think was his name.
Oh,
Um,
Bartray, yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
I let him go because I was like, okay, I'm trying to get the full experience, right?
Hmm.
Um, but I replayed maps a bajillion times because I was like, I'm not doing that again. But almost every time, except for again, this is mostly in part two. Almost every time, like if I made a mistake, I would then know kind of how to react to it. I guess the only criticism I have to that is that it sort of becomes like trial and error, right? Like if I know exactly where these units are, the reinforcements are going to come in because they always come in the same spot, the same turn
Hmm.
Hmm.
every time, right?
Yep.
Like
Hmm.
that then becomes just a game of me knowing the answer as opposed to me strategizing for the answer, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so sometimes I was like, I kind of wish they would like mix it up a little bit, like, maybe throw them up there, but that might make it, a degree of unfairness that it would even be beyond what I would be able to tolerate. But I think it would be better than bosses that it can only take damage from like one character, which, even like at the end of chapter 10, like I had one character who could do damage to the boss. And I was like, so Lynn's chapter, her final chapter, and I was like, I don't think this is super fun. So I guess my point is that like, while I don't love that, I do wish that sometimes the difficulty would have happened maybe in a different way, except for like these damage sponge bosses. I don't know. That's just me though.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. And definitely the thing you're talking about with the bosses, where most bosses are located on usually like thrones or gates, and thrones or gates typically confer like pretty significant bonuses to avoid and defense and hit to those boss enemies. So part of the reason why they're so difficult to damage is because they're getting a terrain bonus from the tile that they're on. So that's less
Think
of a
about
problem
that.
with moving bosses, but then moving bosses, the problem is you can't approach them on your own terms. They're just going to show up and
Yeah, I was gonna say the moving bosses means they might move to you.
yes, yes. So and that is a thing like throne. Like I've always been kind of mixed on that. Like on the one hand, like it does make them more imposing, and if your characters are very strong, then giving the throne kind of levels the playing field, right? But if your characters are a little underpowered, then that could be a really huge problem. And that's the thing about Fire Emblem too, is that like level ups and stat increases are random. So they're assigned based on growth rates. And actually, this is not something that's visible in the game. So you would have to consult sources outside the game to get this information. But each unit has a particular percentage growth rate assigned to each stat. And when they level up, that percentage is how likely they are to gain a point in that stat per level up. So each time a unit levels up, they have a chance to gain a point in every single stat possible based on those growth rates. And so that what that means is that units will grow differently based on essentially luck, right? And those growth rates. So you may have a unit that you get really lucky and they level up 5 times and they get strength every time. Or you may have a unit where they have a 30% strength growth and they level up 5 times and they don't get strength any of those times. And so that means that units can vary wildly in terms of their performance depending on how their level ups are going. And so that kind of creates these kind of problems where you may have in a particular run units that are really underpowered or units that are overpowered, and then the challenge, is very variable depending on those, how lucky you've gotten with level ups, essentially.
That's cool too, right?
Mhm.
Like it's fun because like it makes characters strong in different runs, unless you're really really unlucky, right? Like I
Mhm.
don't know if Kent is generally considered one of the best characters in the game, but like
He
my
is, yeah.
Kent absolutely wrecked for like most of this game until the end when he couldn't do any damage to the bosses. But for most of this game, like I would send him out, he would go and just like wipe out like 5 units for me, because usually there were like 75 units as opposed to my 15, but my units are a
Mhm.
lot more powerful, so it makes sense. So I thought that was really, but like I was like I don't know if he's really strong. Like I interestingly, you guys were complaining about Wallace earlier, but because he leveled up so easily in Lynn's chapters because he got that general promotion, like he was still pretty strong for me, and he was actually one of the only people who could do damage to the final boss for me,
Huh?
because he was always in my party because he was so much more powerful than everybody else. So it's
Mhm.
just sort of interesting the way that works.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a major difference. I mean, everybody, that is one of the benefits of this game is everybody's going to have a different experience, and every run's going to be different because everybody's characters are going to be different. So there are times when, like when I was playing through this time, my Elliewood got strength and defense like almost every level up. So by the time I promoted him, he's like rocking like 18 strength, 15 defense, 20 speed, and that makes him like incredibly powerful. But it's also very easy for Elliewood to get really screwed on some of those stats and be like promoted and have like 10 strength, and that is a huge difference in terms of like performance of a unit. So everybody kind of has their own experience through the game, and that kind of makes everybody's playthrough unique, and that's what's fun about it is everybody's characters end up different from each other. Yeah.
The big thing with Wallace to me is uh, so every character has a maximum level of 20. And so because of those random stats, the like quote unquote optimum way, I mean it is technically the optimum way, is to wait until you get a character as high level as you can before you level them up, because you can effectively go from 1 to 20 twice. So you're if you level Wallace up at level 10, he's kind of like maxing out at level 30 instead of level 40. You're missing
Yes.
10
I mean,
chances
I
to
never came
Yeah.
even close to getting anybody to level
Oh,
20
yeah.
even on the second rank up. So
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing too is like on normal it's a lot more possible to do that because you don't really need the additional power of a promotion to get through chapters just because they're not as difficult. But when you're playing on hard, you pretty much have to promote units earlier because you need the promotion bonuses to actually like get through chapters. So typically, like optimal play on the hardest difficulty will see you promoting your characters anywhere from level 12 to like 14 or 15. It is like you're saying, Lucas. It is always better to get them more levels, but it may not be worth trying to feed them levels when you could immediately promote them and give them like when they promote, they get static bonuses to stats that aren't tied to the growth rates. So, for example, you might promote Raven and he gets like 3 strength, 3 speed, 2 defense, no matter what his stats are when you promote
turns
him.
Raven into a god. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that and like a three points in a stat can be the difference between a unit
Yeah, that's
sucking and a unit
huge.
being really good. Yeah. So in those cases, like you actually really need those promotion bonuses to make units viable for the harder chapters. But you can, I know Lucas, you probably did a lot of arena abuse, and that it will enable you to
Yeah.
level up characters to max level before promoting them pretty easily. Yeah.
When you mentioned people having different experiences, the first thing that was coming to mind is, oh yeah, like when you guys were talking about not having any money. Um,
Yes, doing the arena will get you a lot of money. That's the
The
other benefit of it. Yeah.
so the first arena, it's the one right before the pirate ship.
Mhm.
They make Elliewood makes a comment about the captain wants 100,000 gold to take you on the ship, and by the time I was done in the arena, I could have actually just paid him instead of fighting the pirates. It is not okay.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that's the thing. Like the game lets you do that, and the arena, of course, comes with its own risks. So it's a real battle between you and an enemy character, and sometimes that enemy could be really really strong, and your units can die in the arena, and then just you might have to reset the chapter or whatever, reset your progress. Of course, if you're playing with save states, then that's a good way around the risks of the arena. But yeah, like it is a way that you can, because the other thing is that it allows you to fight multiple enemies in succession. So you're not spending, like, if you win a fight, you can then do another fight and then do another fight. And every time you do another fight, you get more money and more experience. So you can do like multiple fights in one turn, and that can allow you to rack up experience and money very quickly. But of course, your unit has to be powerful enough to actually withstand multiple fights in the arena. So there is always that kind of risk reward element to everything. But that is a common thing that people will do is use the arena to make their characters really really strong and bypass some of the difficulty of the game.
The other piece with the arena in that particular case is that there are also shops right next door. So you just
Yeah.
send your healer. You can just heal or use the money from the arena to buy healing staves, and then you use your healer to keep your characters alive, and then
See, now this is the min-maxing I needed in my life in this game.
yeah. I was not going to spend as much time as I ended up doing. And then my wife made a comment about, you could keep doing that. That's like the best way to level up the healers. And I was like, oh, yeah, it is.
And I will say the arena is more difficult on hard. So you're more likely to have like stronger enemies. So that also kind of deters arena abuse on harder difficulty.
It's fair.
But it is always viable, especially if your units are strong enough. Like if you have a unit that can survive rounds in the arena, then there's like no reason to not do it, because it's just easy money and experience that way. Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely what I will do the next time I play a Fire Emblem game after some of my experiences here. Yeah. Um, I feel like we haven't really talked about the story much, but I am kind of okay with that because I think that we can kind of talk maybe more about it next time.
Yeah.
But I would like to talk a little bit more about some of the specific maps that we were impressed with, some of the characters who maybe we had a lot of luck with, who we thought were interesting, or maybe some maps that we thought were particularly memorable. Because I think that, like, to me, like that sort of is like the defining trait of this. So we're limiting ourselves to the first 19 chapters here. And I'm going to steal one. I know that other people like it, but is the boat chapter. I thought was really good, and I think that the maps in this game have some interesting gimmicks sometimes with the fog or with things like that, but they're relatively easy to overcome, and they sometimes can be repetitive, or even like those like sort of like dungeon castles. I thought mages were really, really powerful. Like Lucius was an absolute monster for me by the end game because he was killing things so often. He ended up being, I think, the closest I got to level 20 after a rank up. I think he was like level 18 or something. Still couldn't damage the final boss, but he was like level 18 or something, and so he was just like ripping through stuff. But it's also because I think there's so often like I needed to be able to fire one tile over, and I couldn't do it with an archer, but I could do it with magic. And so I thought he was really strong, and mages in general I found to be pretty useful in this game. But overall, I thought that sometimes they were a little bit samey. But one of my absolute favorite levels was like there's a boat where you basically have boats on two sides. I can't remember the exact name of it off the top of my head. It is
The
what's it
pirate
called?
ship.
The pirate ship. Really cool level. And I was like, just getting destroyed for a second there. I was like, what is going on here? I couldn't figure out like how to stop these enemies from just constantly bombarding me. And then I realized like I need to take my Hector, I need to take my Marcus, and I need to literally block these paths. Like my most powerful units, my tankiest units, they can't get past me. Make sure I keep everybody else out of range, and then just kind of wait it out, and let them walk up to Hector and then die because that's what they do when they try to fight Hector. And it was just really cool to figure it out. Once I figured it out, I actually thought it was like one of the easiest levels in the whole game. But before that, I was really struggling, but, like, it was really satisfying for it not just to be like I know the answer because I know where they spawn. I knew the answer because I figured it out. And it might be seemed like very basic to everybody who's listening right now, but that wasn't basic to me. It was very fun and cool.
I liked the one where you have to fight the guy who's trying to start the rebellion or is working for the evil cult that's starting the rebellion. And he kind of throws his son to the ringer
Oh yeah,
later
yeah.
on in the fight.
Yes.
I thought that was an interesting one because you had the 2 villages that you could go visit, and then you also had the pirates attacking from the other side while you were possibly trying to get to the castle. So it was kind of like you had to divide your units up depending on the circumstances. And then I think there was rain at one point, which was an
Mhm.
interesting choice. Yep. That was probably one of my favorite maps.
I think that's the one where you get Irk back as well.
Yeah, Irk
So
back
you have to
and
like
Priscilla.
yes. Okay, my favorite's the boat, but outside of that,
Sorry.
I did really like the one where I'm trying to remember which like where you physically were, but it was the one where you're going into the throne room and there's the characters that are in jail. And
Oh,
partway
that's
through
yeah. You're retaking Kalen Castle.
yes.
Yeah.
That's where you get Lucius as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's where you get
Raven,
Lucius and
yeah.
Raven. And it's where you but I like it has some of the treasure chest rushing that you get to like try and get to the treasure chest before certain turns to get there ahead of the thieves. But it also has this factor of like partway through these soldiers break out of jail and you have to like if you don't escort them carefully, they will just get murdered. And I like the fact that there's nothing in that mission that says you have to save them, but you do get a reward for saving them.
Oh, do you?
And
Because I definitely didn't save them.
You
I was
do,
like,
yes.
oh. I was like, those
minor.
guys aren't named characters. They can die. It's fine. There's
You
fodder.
get
So
a
it's
gem.
the villager kind of protect the villagers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you get a gem that you can sell for a lot of money for protecting them. Yep.
Cash
Yeah.
sounds nice. Oh,
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I'm
mean,
seeing all my mistakes now.
But yeah, I just really like the fact that it was this like it wasn't the like hard code or like hardcore escort mission. It was an optional thing that added another little layer of defense or of a challenge to it, and there were lots of little things to it.
Yeah, so one of the early chapters I really like is actually one that's exclusive to Hector's story, which is Hector's chapter 15 called Talons of Light, where you have it's after you're in laws and you've defeated Eric and his dad fleed or whatever, and so this is like an additional chapter where you're actually defending laws from you're defending the inside the castle from some mercenaries who are loyal to laws, and then they actually show up later in a later chapter. But this is one of the earliest defense missions where you have to basically like you are defending the throne rather than the enemy defending a throne, and they are coming in from all sides attacking you. So, at this point, you don't have very many units, and you don't have a lot of tanky units. I mean, you have Marcus, and you have Oswin, and you have Hector, But there are about, I'm looking at the map now, one, two, three, like 4 or 5 different kind of choke points that you have to block off. So that requires you to like even use some like squishier units to kind of block enemies coming in. And then at the bottom of the map, there are 2 chests that you'd want to get with your thief, but then they have a thief that continuously spawns from the bottom, much closer to the chest than you are. So you kind of have to manage like blocking off the enemies from coming to attack you, um, getting the chests at the same time, and preventing them from getting to the throne room. And that's a really fun challenge. Also, a lot of the enemy units on this map are mages and also nomads, the mounted bow units.
Dude,
So
this sounds impossible.
it's pretty difficult, yeah, especially on hard. And they're like, a lot of the enemies are like behind walls, so they have a lot of enemy types on this map that can hit you across the wall, and you have much fewer ranged units than they do. So there's a lot of like opportunities for them to attack you, and you can't attack back. So it's a pretty fun, challenging map. Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot of good maps. There's some later that I might bring up when we are on part two, that I think are really interesting. And I think Hector's mode gets some of the most interesting maps, which makes sense because obviously it's intended for people who've already played through the game, so they can kind of ramp up the complexity a little bit. But it is a shame that some of that is behind like an additional playthrough, because it would be cool to have some of those maps, more accessible to every player. Um, but yeah, that's one of my favorites for sure.
You're really selling Hector mode. Every time you talk about it, I'm like, well, that sounds interesting, you know? I
Yeah.
like interesting.
One thing
Yeah.
I'll add to about Hector mode is one way that they make the game more difficult is that they add enemy Pegasus Knights to a bunch of
Oh,
chapters that don't originally have them.
that changes the game a lot.
Yes, because since they're flyers, they can go behind your defense formations, right? They can just kind of go around you or go over different spots, so you can't choke point them. So that makes things a lot more difficult, because all of a sudden there might just be a like Pegasus Knight swooping in and like hitting your healer, or hitting like your squishier mages or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that makes things a lot.
Makes
You have to
bow
change it up.
users probably a lot more useful.
Yes,
I
it
thought they
makes
were kind
archers
of
useful.
mediocre in normal.
Yeah, I mean that's a big problem with just Fire Emblem in general, because of the structure of the player phase and enemy phase, and because enemies have there's so many more enemies on a map than there are your own units. It makes it so that the enemy phase is a lot more important than the player phase for actually like getting kills. And archers, unfortunately, because they can only hit at 2 range, they can't hit at 1 range. They have no enemy phase. So enemies will only engage them right up close, and won't be able to counterattack. And so that just makes archers like really bad. And that's just kind of inherent to the design of the game. You were saying earlier, Zach, that like mages are really good, and you're right. And one of the reasons mages are really good is because they have 1-2 range, right? They can always attack up close, and they can always attack
Right.
far. So they're always able to counterattack. And then that's another thing. It also means that sword units are a lot weaker in this game, because sword units don't have access to a 1-2 range except for very rare instances like the light brand, for example. But there are very cheap, easy to get 1-2 range options for both lances and axes, javelins and hand axes. So that means that like axe units and lance units and mages are a lot better than everybody else. And that's just kind of a side effect of the way that the game is designed. And I don't think most players will really even notice that. Like if you want to use an archer, you
Oh, I
obviously
did.
can use an archer, right? Like it doesn't make you unable to complete the game. But it is a pretty big thing that like weights certain units over others, right? And so like one thing that makes cavaliers really good is they get access to both lances and axes, so they're really strong. Or heroes are really good because they go from being sword locked to having access to axes, so then they can be strong against lances and they have access to a ranged attack. So some units are just frankly better than others, and that is kind of affected in the balance a little bit. But every unit can be viable if you really want to use them. So it's never so impactful that like you can't use a unit, but you start to notice it, especially if you play the game multiple times. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I've been taken to school today, and I mean that in the best
So-
possible way.
sorry.
I was like, no, I mean that positively. I was like, dang, dude, I know how to play this game now. I should have talked to Ben for an hour before I started playing it, and I'd be much better at it. No, it's good. Because I think before we record part 2, I want to hop into Hector mode. And listeners, I know that we've barely talked about story, but there's a lot to kind of uncover mechanically here. I think the mechanics are the interesting part. We will definitely dive into the story and some of the late stuff later in part 2. Talk about Elliewood's story. I think there are some cool moments, and I'm guessing I didn't see a lot of the cool moments because of the structure of this game and the mechanics that we discussed earlier. But I had a really good time chatting with the three of you about those things or about the mechanics, and I think that we'll be able to talk about the story a little bit more and some of the more specific maps and specific issues that we dealt with in part 2. So speaking of, if we're talking about that, I should talk about what's coming up next. So in 2 weeks, we are, of course, going to continue our discussion of Fire Emblem: The Blazing Blade. We will talk about story, some endgame stuff, maybe some of the units that really carried us through to the end. After that, just decided on this pretty recently, we're going to have an episode on our favorite final fights. So basically our favorite final bosses. I feel like a lot of times final bosses struggle to be any good. And I was thinking about it and I'm like, let's do an episode about that, because I think there are some that are really excellent. I think a fan favorite panelist will be there. She's also a favorite of mine. Go figure. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can email us retro@rpgfan.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, Blue Sky, Twitch, YouTube. And you can also join our Discord. If you search RPG Fan Discord, you can find us there. You can chat with a few of us there. I am sometimes responsive, sometimes not. It just depends on how busy I am. We also have a shop if you want to support us, selling t-shirts, mugs, things like that. You go to rpgfan.com/shop or just Google it. You'll find it that way. We also have 2 other fine podcasts, Random Encounter, which is usually every other Monday, hosted by John O'Logan, usually about current events, current reviews, things like that, things that just came out. And then the other Monday is Rhythm Encounter with RPG music. We would love it if you reviewed us. Just even throw in 5 stars at us. Helps us get the word out there. Helps more people listen to us. So wherever you're listening to us, if you could just take 2 seconds and I hate to say like smash that like button, but it's the truth. It actually does help.
Right,
and let's talk.
algorithm.
I know, right? Yay, SEO. That's the reality we live in, y'all. So let's talk about where to get in touch with the individual panelists, starting with you, Audra.
Oh, you can email me at audrab@rpgfan.com.
Perfect. And Lucas.
You can find me on pretty much all of the same social medias at Rafegall, RAEFGALL, and on YouTube. Let's see, I think when this comes out, will still be Final Fantasy Tactics.
Okay. Well, that's a game I like. A tactical game I like a lot, even more than this one. Anyway, Ben, how can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can email me at benloganlove@gmail.com.
Perfect. And if you want to get in touch with me personally, Discord, I'm Zach W over there. If you see like a picture of Kaine from Nier, that's me, pretty much everywhere nowadays. And you can email me, zachw@rpgfan.com. And yeah. So thanks again, you 3, and thank you, listeners. Good night and good luck.